So now is the time to ask all the silly questions and tricky questions you can find about cross-platform to these guys who we believe are some kind of experts of the cross-platform. Okay, the pressure is here. So we will just do a round table of the round table. I'll ask each of them what is the cross-platform in Haxe for you. I mean either the libraries such as OpenFL, NME, or Lime, or the frameworks you use to do cross-platforms. And then we'll have some people here, I know, like Elliot, who have really tricky questions.
And I'll be here for the question with the microphone.
And Raf will, yeah, okay. So maybe we'll do this way, because Todd is really, how you say, you like to talk in public. You have the habit to talk in public, so no problem. Okay.
Hi, for those of you I haven't met, I think I met most of you. I'm Todd Kulik. I work at TiVo. TiVo's come up a few times. We'll tell you about more of what we're up to tomorrow. I'm VP of Technology at TiVo. We use OpenFL. We use NME. I actually have a slide that lists everything we use Haxe Lab-wise. But we are currently targeting predominantly the C++ backend. Hopefully Gabe and I will demo that tomorrow. But we are also using JavaScript backend, and we're currently working on tools and things that use HX Java backend. Is this roughly what you had in mind? Yeah.
Well, part of my daily work is to make games, and we make games for desktop and mobile and the web. And so I built recently a framework called H3D. It's basically a way to abstract the GPU and to use it more high level. And I work on porting it to WebGL. So its first version was stage 3D and Flash, and now it works on WebGL. I still haven't merged the two branches, but it's on the way.
Yeah, so my name's Hugh Sanderson. You've met me already. Worked on mainly NME as the cross-platform library, which, as far as I'm use it, contains Flash and C++. There is a Java backend in with the OpenFL online, but I haven't had much to do that. Within the C++ compiler itself, you could almost say there's multiple platforms there with each of the sub-targets and compiler chains. So I guess I've had quite a lot of cross-platform within the C++ as well as a little bit of Flash.
Hello, my name is Kawe, and I've worked most of my time on the Haxe Java and Haxe C# targets. I've started the Haxe C# at first when I was working a lot with Unity, and I wanted to use Haxe and Unity and use for networking. And before that, I knew Haxe because of Flash. I used to, I worked with the OA3D team to port OA3D Lite to Haxe, and I've always been very interested in 3D and Haxe.
Hi, I'm Sven from Berlin, and I work at Game Duel. And yeah, I'm very new to this community, but I really like it. So last year we developed our own OpenGL engine with Objective-C, and then we ported it to Android to pure Java. And yeah, we discovered writing everything twice is not that good. So yeah, we were looking for actually cross-compiling solutions, and I evaluated Haxe early this year, and it made it.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
So aren't they really experts of cross-platform? honestly. Sounds great what you said. So I guess, Elliot, you'll have to start the hostility.
Hi, I'm writing, or written a Go to Haxe translator, which I'm going to talk about tomorrow. One of the key things I think there's an opportunity for Haxe to be the target for compilers, especially for new languages. And in order to help that, it'd be really useful if there were all of the data types available on all of the platforms. So, for example, 8-bit signed and unsigned available everywhere, and all of the others you can think of too. That would be a really useful thing to have. I have a list of other things that would be useful, but that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, we want that as well, and we are working on it. Before it was a bit hard because we didn't have the right data types for that. We had to kind of write things directly into the compiler. But now with the things we've been working on abstracts, we can actually write things directly as abstracts and make sure we provide an emulation layer to ensure the same way, whatever the platform. The only issue is that sometimes, for instance, you say you want inside int 8, well, so byte, inside byte type. It might actually be slower in JavaScript because there is no such type. So you need to perform something on all the operations, but that's the only thing. But we will definitely provide them first as abstracts, so as opaque types that can be manipulated and make sure that you get the good results. We have already like int32 and int64, and we will add more as we go. And then when they are available, we will use on C++, for instance, or Java, or C#, so we will use native type in place of that.
I've got a question on one side. So who already did some native platform development with Haxe in this room? Can you raise a hand? Okay. Okay, it's not that much actually. So I would like maybe for the others who don't really know this, if you could describe maybe the main tools which are available for people to target like native platforms. It can be multiple people to answer. Huh? It's
to target the native platform, as in the compiled platform, or or a Java platform.
By native, I mean native, yeah, like C++.
Yeah.
Or,
yeah. So yeah, so the Haxe code can compile down to almost any target by the correct specification of a tool chain, and you can generate anything from a executable to a load link library or a dynamic library, and you can run a little executable on an Android device, but doing that is actually not that useful. So on top of just being able to compile to the target, you'll also need some infrastructure. I'm talking mainly here about mobile devices. On a desktop, you can generally just run your executable if that's what you're trying for. So my main personally involvement is with the NME target, which allows you to compile to the native code, and then it also adds a layer on top of that, which allows you to install it on the native device and take care of some of these other things that actually aren't really C++ targeting. It's in fact kind of more device targeting. So yeah, I guess as far as tools go, I've worked with NME. Closely related to NME is OpenFL, which is sort of parallel to NME and shares a lot of common code, and you'll get a similar performance on both targets. OpenFL also allows you to target JavaScript, and NME has a few more internal features to do with the video and stuff that I've added recently. And there's also the Lime library, which has only the basic subset of native functions that you need to get an OpenGL window up and running with some audio. So that's kind of a sort of a cutback version say, enemy or the Lime target.
Okay, and another question for the crowd. Who has ever used enemy? Okay, and who has ever been using Lime? Okay, and what about OpenFL? Okay, okay. Okay, so it might be like a basic question, but I'm just asking for everybody to be clear on this one. Why different projects for sometimes the same targets? You know.
That's a good question. I think, one of the reasons for OpenFL's, I guess, separation from NME was to try to pick up the Flash refugees who are jumping ship and looking for something better. But along with having the name OpenFL also comes a certain stigma of being associated with Flash. And I think mainly Joshua has tried to address this by having the two separate libraries with two distinct modes of operation, Lime for not Flash, OpenFL for Flash, and therefore cover both bases. But this differs with my philosophy of actually really trying to support both sets of developers from within NME. Now NME and OpenFL actually do share the same native code, so in fact they are very closely related. On top of this, I guess you get a kind of different kind of tooling with OpenFL, which it could be thought of as a question of taste. So if you like the kind of workflow and so I guess naming and stuff that you get with OpenFL versus what you get with NME, I think it just becomes a personal choice. But they're largely compatible, and I think there's room for people to try both. If you write code for OpenFL, it will generally compile with NME as well. So I think at some point it's a question of taste. There still may be some scope here to get them even closer together and perhaps reunify them. We're just still just trying to work out what the philosophical or practical differences are between the two libraries.
If anybody has some questions, it's like question time.
That was interesting. Maybe you can tell more about Lime position between these two, OpenFL and NME.
Yeah, basically I see that separation of those libraries that way because I'm coming from the native part, and I see there are basically two camps which are coming more from web development and kind of browsers, and the other is coming more like from native development. So so I see there are different subsets what you want from your product in the end. So as we are targeting mobile, the mobile market is very highly addicted to super performance apps. So they want to have like the great fancy and stuff, particles, all that things. And at some points just try to make a good particle renderer with canvas objects. Maybe that also leads to a kind of fragmentation to libraries, because the one wants to make this browser things, and the other wants to really go under the hood and tune for very good performance. So that's why we stick to the ground.
So I think you guys' views are both very interesting. You guys are definitely dug in the native space. At TiVo, we're building a large application that we're delivering both natively compiled to multiple platforms, but we want to deliver that same very large code base to browser devices that will JIT JavaScript at the last second. And that's often, we're doing that often because there are platforms where the development environments don't allow for native compilation. There's no tool chains for certain devices, and the only way to deliver an experience to those devices is with JavaScript. So for us, I completely understand the extra features and power you guys want to dig out, but I also appreciate that if I don't need all of those features, I can build one application and take it to this array of platforms. And for me, I kind of think when I first looked at OpenFL last year, after Joshua announced it, I had to try to come to terms and understand what it meant and how it might affect our plans. We were using NME at the time. We still use NME, but we're also using OpenFL. As Hugh said, it's possible to use them together if you use the right subset of the API, which is a lot of API still, actually. And we are doing that with a very large application. And again, I think of OpenFL as sort of a way to modularize NME before Geesh and the browser target were embedded in there. It's quite a large, very powerful but complicated piece of technology between its native code and its very interesting, clever tooling, which includes both how to compile for many targets and run on targets. As you say, it also knows how to package assets and build APKs for Android and all kinds of things. So for me, I was actually quite excited about the idea of modularizing that into pieces so that they were a little more understandable, like getting the tools and the native backend to be separate from the hex code. So for me, I see it kind of as just a simple evolution into more modular pieces. And I really appreciate the idea that the lower level things could be used directly and have significantly more power, but still be available as building blocks for the Flash, those fleeing Flash, let's say, to find a place to go with that code.
Yeah, just one thing to add. Actually, on desktop, the problem is not so much complicated because the speed of JavaScript today is very near from native. I mean, it's good enough to write a lot of things that you don't have to care much about the difference. The main problem is about mobile because there is a very huge difference in speed on mobile between JavaScript and native apps. So it's a bit hard to choose, and you can see what you are telling about the difference of approach in mobile is very true. And the idea is that, as I see it, that you first have to define somehow how you render things. If you, for example, if you have a GPU, which all mobiles and all desktop have, then you at least you just take care already of the rendering part, and then the user code part can be either native or JavaScript. It's just code logic, so it doesn't care anymore as long as it drives rendering on GPU. That's kind of thing, I think, kind of area of research that's interesting. The thing is that it's actually a different paradigm because compared to Flash, because Flash was mostly a software rendering tool, and the whole API is built for software rendering, like the vectorizing graphics and everything is more a CPU thing than a GPU one. You can run on GPU, but the API has not been designed for that. It's been designed to be rendering in like skylines in CPU. So we are a bit at the tipping point right now when you have all these users coming from Flash and they want to keep their workflow and go maybe mobile or native or keep on HTML5 or whatever, and they want to keep their tools. So OpenFL, I see it is an answer to that. Okay, we will just, you can keep your workflow and you can go to other device and have more like a freedom of choice about the platform you target, and eventually also be independent from Adobe and whatever that does with the technology. And at the same time, you have another like emerging trend, which is more GPU-oriented, which is thing that I'm doing with H3D, and Flamby is doing also with WebGL support or Starling, or these kind of things, which are much more, okay, we have a GPU, you have a GPU, we have a code logic, how do we make, we don't care really if the code is running JavaScript on desktop or on the desktop is compiled to native on everything. And even for the GPU, you can switch the driver between OpenGL or DirectX or whatever is supported or even emulated in some cases. Yeah, you don't want to do that, but anyway. And well, that's our stage 3D for Flash, for instance. I mean, that's kind of two different ways, and we are still at the point when, for instance, in your case, you don't have always a GPU, so you can't really go this way. But in well, I think that's current trends right now, and yeah, I think we keep going for years until it's completely when maybe the GPU would be everywhere at some point, and we don't even think about rendering things on the CPU or that kind of thing.
We have just one more question, time for one more question. I would suggest about maybe Wax or desktop interfaces or whatever.
That was going to be my about yes. For now, NME and OpenFL, it's very targeted toward games. It's really a low-level graphics API. But when you do application like iPhone or Android, you also need a UI toolkit. So for Haxe, there is not so much solution for now for native UI toolkit access. There are things like Haxe UI, which are cross-platform implementation. What's your opinion on this? What's a good solution for this kind of applications?
Well, this is just my personal opinion on this. I don't build like traditional mobile applications, but for me, my opinion is that if you're building, for instance, something which is HTML5 based, then you have some kind of website looking. And if you don't do that, it means maybe you want to have some kind of native looking application. So you need to adapt to what is a device controls looks like to feel really native. And then that's another story, because you can either emulate the things, but then you get a new version of Android, and then looks is different. And well, so maybe there is not yet like a really cross-platform way of doing things for this specific case, because you want to look native on mobile. But of course, you should consider using, if you're doing a lot of UI stuff, I think HTML is maybe the best workflow you can find. And there is a lots of libraries for use like UI components in HTML5. So I guess we have choice here.
Well, I've worked on some of these issues quite a lot. I have at work we use a little library I made that lets you embed a simple web view into iOS. It's currently iOS only because that's what we're focusing on right now. But I think that there are two things. There are two different things. You know, if you want an UI for a game, you know, it's hard to make it look native. I think that in these terms, Cocktail actually does a great job allowing you to use the tools that you, the designers and all the tools that we are already used to on this field. And but when you are looking for an enterprise app or something like that would deal with a lot of forms and stuff like that, I've been looking into implement a really as a library that allows you to access the controls from the platforms natively themselves. You know, so it doesn't. It's a complicated work because it involves a lot of different platforms and working with the quirks that may come from this. It's not. It's hard to work on this, but in the end. There's not much. There are not much libraries that actually can do that anywhere, except when you use actually a web view. You know, I think the only one that comes into my mind is Qt, but Qt is hard to.
sorry, just very quickly. I'm fascinated. I had no idea you had looked into that. I'm totally going to hit you up later tonight to tell me all about it. But I think there's things like Sencha and Mono. There are cross development. There are a lot of people obviously who have the problem of, I want to build something, I want to run it on Android and iOS. This is a very common problem. And so actually before we decided to use Hex, we spent a bit of time looking at those technologies. We picked Hex. So that might tell you something about where we thought, especially on the UI side, and the value of that for us. But I think there are some out there. But
yeah, I just have a few comments of this with respect to something like NME. I think the problem of native widgets is actually orthogonal to NME, and I would see it as a completely secondary library to handle native widgets. Not necessarily unrelated, but yeah, a completely separate library. Maybe they would work together. For instance, I've added the Android view and the iOS view to put the OpenGL window in effectively a separate native sort of widget, which you can then easily embed in a larger page with native widgets. Then you're still left with using Xcode or Eclipse to drag your buttons around and do that, and that's obviously duplication, which you'd rather avoid. But the flip side of that, it would be to have some kind of library which has like an abstract button with some certain properties, but then one device might have a swipe to do something, another device might require you to respond to a long press or something, and it no longer becomes like either really simple or really cross-platform. You're still left with some underlying complexity that you just have to suck up somehow. With on the desktop, I have the Wax, which is a native widget set, and again, you can either choose to or not embed an NME view within that. So, yeah, I think we're all saying it's a hard problem, and I'm really hoping that someone out there will come up with a great solution. We can all just use it. Yeah.
One last possibility would be to have some really well-maintained and very complete library similar to XUI. We maybe more teams, because I don't love so much the default one, but that's another story. And that will somehow, because it's UI components is a lot of code logic and a bit of rendering. So if somehow this component library will abstract the actual rendering into some kind of driver or something, then we could implement the driver using NME or using WebGL or using Canvas or whatever it is. And then we will have some kind of very cross-platform UI thing that can blend into any technology. And I think that will be the best, but I think it's a bit hard to build, but not that much, because usually you kind of have components have different properties that a lot of code logic, and then you have some time when you draw things on the screen. So it's just this part need to be abstracted using, points and lines and gradients and pictures. And it's not very big, but I think it could really be the way to go. Yeah.
I'm afraid we'll have to go and drink something now. I'm so sorry, but we don't have time anymore. It's late.
Oh, too bad.
And all of you who are watching the live stream, now is the time where you regret not to come to Paris. So thank you very much, everybody. And I think we are going to talk cross-platform all night. Bye.